Acts chapter 18. We're in Acts chapter 18. I know some of you are thinking, well, are we ever going to get out of Acts? You shouldn't be asking that because Acts are part of service. Y'all didn't get that, but you'll get it in a little while. You are supposed to be acting, let's put it that way. Acts chapter 18, and I want to talk a little bit this morning about discouragement. The discouragement, what I see discouragement is an anchor. It's like an anchor, and it doesn't matter how strong you are or how small the discouragement is, it will always slow you down. Now, discouragement leads to an emotional turmoil such as depression. And you would think that depression leads to discouragement. That's not how it works. However, the Bible doesn't tell us to impress one another to keep from being depressed. It tells us to encourage one another to keep others from being discouraged. Depression is felt when you have an abundance of discouragement and a lack of encouragement. According to the ADAA, which is the Anxiety Disorder Association of America, 6% of adults in the United States are depressed. That's 14.8 million adults live every day with chronic depression. Now, Rick Warren, pastor of the Saddleback Church and writer of New York Times bestseller, A Purpose-Driven Life, says that discouragement is what causes it to affect you mentally. But not only mentally, but physically. He calls him the 4 F's: fatigue, frustration, failure, and fear. Even the most revered apostles became discouraged. Listen to what Everett Harrison, which is a Reformed 20th century theologian, said of Paul. He said, the combination of only limited success at Athens, loneliness, and the prospect of facing this city with its commerce and vices accounts for the weakness and fear that gripped the apostle when he arrived to begin his work. Paul had been driven out of Damascus, Jerusalem, Antioch of Pisidia, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe, Thessalonica, Berea. He had just left a lukewarm bunch in Athens, and now he was all by himself. There comes a time in life when we feel as if it would be better if we were not here. There comes a time in life where we think that we're of no good and no use to other people. But here, I want you to see that when dealing with discouragement, God has placed us where He wants us to be, in the place that we are at this time for His purposes. This is what Paul is learning in this text. When dealing with discouragement, I see Paul deals with 3 different forms in our text this morning, and they should be up on here. The first one, he starts to deal with loneliness. Now, loneliness is an incredible thing. Listen, you know, Mother Teresa said this about loneliness. The biggest disease today is not leprosy or cancer or tuberculosis, but rather the feeling of being unwanted, uncared for, and deserted by everybody. That is the true sickness. So what can we do for loneliness? We kind of feel alone in the crowd. Have you ever felt alone in a crowd? When I first got to Manchester to this Jesus tent, and I saw all the people coming in, and I saw all the things that were selling at this place and things that were going on, I kind of felt a little out of my element. And that's hard for me to feel out of my element because I have a lot of elements, okay? But Jason and Nathan can tell you, this is not a normal place. This is a place, but what I hate to admit to you, there's more happier people at Bonnaroo than there are in Baptist churches every Sunday morning. These folks were having a good time, and we of all people should be having a great time because when they die, most of them are going to go to hell. When we die, most of us are going to go to heaven. But yet, day after day, we are just stuck in this discouragement. And why? Because we feel lonely. We're the only ones there. For months and months on end, Paul had felt lonely, even with people there. And now he gets into the city. He walks 50-plus miles from Athens to Corinth. You know why he went to Corinth? Corinth was the capital city of the Roman province of Greece. Athens was the capital city of Greece, but he went dead into the hornet's nest. And, buddy, you want to talk about feeling out of place. Paul felt out of place. He had moved from Berea to Athens to wait for Silas and Timothy. Now he moves on to Corinth alone. He was in a place many of us had experienced. He had no place to live. He had no friends. And he had never been here before. And he goes in. He was a hyper-educated theologian in the middle of another Sodom and Gomorrah community. He was out in the middle of this thing. Much of the population, according to John MacArthur, was mobile. It was sailors, businessmen, government officials. They were cut off from mainstream and from inhibitions of a settled society. Every evening, from the 1,500-foot cliff and set apart was Corinth Acropolis. On top of that was the temple of Athena, the goddess of love. Every evening, 1,500 prophetess or Aphrodites would come down. There was 1,000 priestesses who were ritual prostitutes. Every evening would come off of the Acropolis to ply their trade. Paul here has gone into a place where he knows nobody. There's no one there that thinks like him. No one there cares for him. And the whole city is full of idolatry and promiscuity. He was out of place. So the master preacher was out of his element. Now there are times when we feel completely alone. The Hebrew writer tells us to be content with what you have, for he said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? The loneliness cannot harm those who recognize the presence of God in their lives. But the best way, and one way to fight loneliness, I think the best way, finding new friends. Look what happens here with Paul. There's a little test here. I have a little test for you and for me to find out if you are an encourager or a discourager. You're either one or the other. You can't be in the middle. If you are an encourager, you probably have a lot of friends. You also have encouraged other people often. I believe that if you are discouraged, it means that you are not encouraging others and you're playing a victim. Here's a way you can test to see if you are a discourager. How many friends do you have? Now, I'm not saying, I'm the most popular person on Facebook. I'm talking about, do people like to hang around you and like to be around you? And if not, maybe you need to encourage more often. You need to start encouraging others. Stop playing like everything's against you. It's not against you. This is life. And the good news about life is Jesus said, I come to give you life more abundantly. That doesn't mean you're going to have more good times. Everything's going to be happy-go-lucky and apple pie in the sky by and by. No, it's not. It's more life. That means more death, more sickness, more poor, more hungry, more this. And you say, well, Jason, that just doesn't make me happy. That's not my job. I want you to know the root cause of our loneliness and why we don't get along with others sometimes, because we don't have that encouraging heart that God is pouring encouragement into your heart. Your friends are pouring encouragement into your heart. Start giving it back. The most encouraged people I know are those who never cease encouraging others. Would you agree with that or disagree? Okay, I guess you do. If you encourage, if you pray for those who are against you, guess what happens? You can't be mad at them anymore. And you start encouraging. Now, I know that some people you can't live with them. And Paul here was lonely, and he wanted to find something. So what did he do? He went to work. What did Paul do? He went to work. Do you know, I find a lot of times when I can't think of something, or maybe I'm having trouble with a sermon or something like that, and used to I just go to the bathroom. That usually helps things. But that's where I get my best ideas, if y'all didn't know. But I'm going to tell you something. I found out something different. The older I'm getting, it's a little bit more. Get your mind on something else. Start working. Start doing something. And it's amazing how God will reveal to you. And I'm not talking about go get a job. I'm talking about get out and start living your life, because it's so short. It's just a vapor. That's all there is to it. A victim never wins and will never have friends. And Paul was lonely. He was discouraged. He went to work. The Rabbi Judah in the Mishnah, he says, he that does not teach his son a trade does the same as if he taught him to be a thief. One of the things Paul learned in rabbinical teaching was a trade. He was probably a leather worker. They said a tent maker, but probably worked with leather because that's what tents were made of, was leather. And he went and he started working in this community. He didn't go off just all of a sudden, trying to tell everybody just about Jesus and it was all about this and that. He decided it was so discouraging. He said, I'm going to go work what I know. And he goes and he works. And guess what? God provided. The names are Aquila and Priscilla. Now, I don't know what kind of a man names their son Aquila. Okay, that doesn't sound like a real tough name. But if he's a leather worker, if you've ever seen someone who works with leather, like makes saddles or anything like that, and you shake their hands, you'll know exactly what to do for a living. It's like shaking a pile of concrete. This Aquila had a sissy name, but he did not have a sissy job. And guess what? He didn't have a sissy wife. She did the same thing he did. But they were kicked out. It says lately they were come from Italy. Leaving Rome was not their idea. Rome expelled all Jews from Italy. And they had to go and ply their trade somewhere else. And even the word, the way it says, it has an idea, it really means to kill. They lately came from Italy, lately slaughtered and fresh. It's kind of fresh meat that's just been cut. Really what one author says is them leaving Rome was an open wound for the couple. They were hurting. Have you ever been hurting so much that you run into someone else hurting? Have you ever done that? You run into somebody else hurting. And then you get so caught up in their hurt that you're trying to encourage them and you forget about how much it hurts you. Have you ever done that? You know, nobody's really, am I up here? Is this on? Just making sure. Has anybody ever done that? I hope you have. I know, Sue, I know you have. There's times where you just get into these little things and you get into this rut and all of a sudden you go out and somebody's having an awful day. And God said, okay, here you go. It's time to encourage. And you start lifting that spirit up. And guess what? You get the encouragement. It's almost like when you give encouragement, you're actually giving to your own bank account, to where there's never-ending encouragement coming. Well, that's what happened. He actually started with discouragement in Corinth, but then he also had to deal with ignorance, verses 5 through 11. There was an old truck, may still be running around Fayetteville now. It was an old truck, had a camper shell on it, and it said on the back window of that camper shell, if ignorance is bliss, why are there not more happy people? Okay, you'll get that in a minute. If ignorance is bliss, why aren't there more happy people? But when dealing with ignorant people, you will find that some people would not move. The whole point of Paul walking and breathing the air of this earth is to tell people about Jesus. And he went into the synagogue. Now, it's so discouraging for us to tell people that they're on their way to hell in a handbasket when they could see it, they just couldn't care less. It's very discouraging for us. Paul and Silas came here, meeting him from Macedonia with a gift, and Paul was able to devote all of his time to preaching instead of tent making or whatever else he was doing. He told the disciples that if they went into the city, or actually he went into the synagogue, and he tried talking to them, but they wouldn't listen. So you know what he does? He takes and he shakes out his robe. He shakes out his robe, and he pretty much tells them, I'm going to the Gentiles now because you Jews aren't listening. Remember what Jesus told them? He told them, actually, he says that if they do not accept you into their hometown, you kick the dust off your feet as a sign. It is a Jewish declaration of contempt. Now, I have people in my family who will not accept fault for their current situations in life. They don't have any friends, and they will wear me out every time I'm placed in their path. And I mean, they're my family, so you know, God says you got to love your family, right? Actually, he doesn't say. You're supposed to love everybody. But we're supposed to love our family. You may not like them very much, but you got to love them, right? Well, I'll tell you what, these folks right here, every time I see them, and it may be at Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, different places like that, and they wear me out. I'm glad y'all don't have people like that. You're looking at me like, I don't have nobody in my family that wears me out. Yes, you do. Stop being so holy. Each and every one of you has a family member who wears you out. Am I the only one? No, okay, all right, I'm glad, because I was getting kind of nervous. I am mean, I know, but I don't know why is that mean. Some people will not move. If you feel like life has dealt you an unfair piece, best thing to do is take blame for it and move on. Now, that's easy to say and very difficult to do. But I'm going to tell you what, the more it eats at you and the more things that get hold of you and the more discouragement you accept, the lower you're going to get and the higher they're going to get. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's not what any of us should do. Well, some people won't move, but some people will move all. If you'll see in verses 8 through 11, the leader of the synagogue, his name was, I love his name, Crispus. He's like one of the Rice Krispies that never got, Snap, Crackle, Pop, and Crispus. He never got on there. He's like the fifth Beatle. Yeah, okay, y'all are really sleepy this morning. That's okay. The leader of the synagogue and his whole house got saved. Folks, this is kind of like if I were to go to the Super Bowl champions. Who was it last time? Patriots? Nobody even knows. Who cares, right? All right, Tom Brady accepts Christ. And next thing, his whole front line accepts Christ because Tom Brady says what goes, right? Even however much air's in the balls. He tells them how much to put air in the balls, right? Well, then you got everybody, even the coach and all the general managers become Christians, and instead of playing football on Sundays, they have church. That's kind of what's going on here. The leader of the synagogue that he just shook out his robe at became a Christian with his whole house. Now, this was not a small house. When you say the household of Jason, you might have 6 or 7 teenagers that come in and out. You talk about the household of Crispus, the head of the synagogue of the head capital city of the Roman Empire in Greece. There were a lot of people in his house. The church started in the house of the synagogue leader that Paul shook out his robe. He gave up. God didn't. And he started that. Discouragement through loneliness and ignorance are the wiles of Satan. Satan does not want God's children happy. He will be lonely in the end, and he wants to punish us by making us think we're lonely and nobody cares about the gospel. It's just not true. Everyone cares for the gospel. God gives everyone the same chance to accept his Son. Now here we see that Paul saw Jesus in a vision. And Jesus said this, and it's always important to quote Jesus. Do not be afraid, but go on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people. Now, how does Jesus already know who the people are in Corinth? Has he ever been to Corinth? No. So how does Jesus know who his people are? Shall we go back to ABCs of Christianity? God is not held back by time. God knows at the end what's going to happen. He knows who is going to accept him. Those are his chosen people. He knew who his chosen people were in Corinth. So Jesus just said, just keep talking because you haven't got all of them yet. And he's telling each one of us, after this trip all week to Manchester with 85,000 people, we're not done yet. We've got a long way to go. This past week, I was blessed to serve thousands of people who would come through that Jesus tent. And I didn't know exactly how many the first day because it was just like everything was really fast, went by. So I just worked 3 hours Friday, so I decided I was going to count. And we have cups that come in 500 cup thing. We put 3 of those out while I was there in 3 hours. 1,500 cups of ice in 3 hours. This whole church should have been in that tent, showing the love of Jesus Christ. We should have been. That's what we're supposed to do. Oh, preacher, make me feel bad. No, I'm giving you a chance. Because guess what? It's happening again next year if Jesus doesn't come back. Each and every one of us need that in our lives. We need to show the love of Jesus. Because I'm going to tell you what, while you're encouraging a teenager that can barely stand up because they're so drunk about Jesus, you're encouraged. And I got more encouragement in 3 hours on Friday than I have in a whole week sitting in my office reading theology journals and Bible and all. I got encouraged. It was very encouraging. Dealing with ignorance can be exhausting, but finally we see dealing with perjury. Now, perjury is a fancy word for lying. Okay? Has anybody ever been lied to? Okay, I'm not even going to ask you. Don't point any fingers. Okay? Has anybody lied to someone else? Okay, I think I don't have to say that either. But I'm telling you what, we're all guilty. We're all guilty of lying. But it really means someone spreading lies about you. Now, there are three reactions to this perjury in this section that I see. Verses 12 and 13, some people just want to hurt you. That's all there is to it. Their only means in life is to make your life a living hell. I'm sorry to say that from the pulpit, but I'm allowed because I'm a preacher. I can say hell whenever I want to. That's what they want to do. They want to make you feel like you're there. They were bringing a crime against Paul and Crispus, who just left the synagogue. So the synagogue got mad and started to file charges in Roman court against Paul and Crispus and all of those. They called it a wicked villainy. This word, literally what it means is an easy work. These folks are being lazy with the law, is what they're saying. Though they had simply were standing in the way of Paul. Now, Jews really wanted to finish Paul's ministry. He takes the same trial as Caiaphas did against Jesus. Jesus was not keeping the law. Remember, Pilate said, I don't care. That's not Roman law. That's Jewish law. You take care of them. But they would not allow it. And they say, if you don't kill him, you are no friend of Caesar. They blackmailed Pilate in order to kill Jesus. Well, Paul was getting ready because these people wanted to hurt him. But some people have common sense. Now, I know there's not many. Not many people have common sense, okay? But that's okay. Gallio was the one that was in charge of judge. He was sitting on the bema seat this day. He was a brother of Seneca, which was a famed Roman philosopher and tutor of Nero. Seneca described his brother Gallio as an intelligent person who hated flattery, was blessed with an unaffected peasant personality, and this was not a matter for Rome. And he says, this is not anything to do with us, overruled. Paul was fixing to start his cross-examination of the witness, and he's going to say, here's why we're doing this. Gallio says, whoa, Paul, hold on a minute. This case is closed. This case is closed. Now, there are times when people will attack you, and they will try to prove that you are a terrible person. Do you know what you need to do about that? Proverbs 25, 21, 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Wouldn't you love to see somebody who just drives you crazy with a big old pile of hot charcoal on their head? Oh, I know that's not Christian, but that right there is what the Bible says. You will burn them up by being so dadgum nice. Kill them with kindness. That's what it says. Some people have common sense, and some people need the sense beaten into them. Now, you won't hear this from many preachers, but I'm going to tell you, a good beating will take care of a lot of problems. It helped Kobe, didn't it? I'm just kidding. Have you ever noticed a little spoiled kid running around doing things he's not supposed to do, and the parents like, well, you know, he just has these problems. He's got a learning disability, and he's got ADD, HDD, and he's had a rough life. And beat him! Give him a whooping! Now, sometimes that don't work. I've seen a parent beat this little girl. She was about 7 or 8 years old. He beat the dog out of her. She turned around and said, that wasn't nothing. Some kids they don't work on. But I'll guarantee you, especially if they're boys, our pastor said that little boys' brains are in their behind, and sometimes you got to drive the point home. But here was an adult. Sosthenes was his name. And it's in the last part, 16 and 17. It sounds harsh, but a good beating will do good to many people. Now, when I was in 7th grade, there was a boy who should have been in high school. He was in 7th grade. I'd have to tell you right there. I was in Scottsboro. That is a little backwards, but that's okay. His name, I'm not going to give you his name because some of y'all may be related to him. But he was going around. He decided, I'm going to pick on everybody who is shorter than me. And the boy was 6'3", so he picked on pretty much everybody. Until he came across this old country boy who had hair at the time, about the same size as I am now. And he said, you aren't going to stand there and you're going to give me my locker. So after he picked himself up off the floor, he decided it wasn't a very, very good idea to play with a fat boy because I tangle. Now, I'm not telling you that to show off. I'm telling you that because my dad taught me if somebody hits you or somebody charges you, bust them. That's all there is to it. If you hit them hard enough, they will not hit you back. I'm telling you the truth. If they need a hit, be godly. Smack them. He needed it. Here, this was a good thing. My dad told me a good swift kick in the behind will solve any behavior problem. Here's what happened to this poor guy. They beat the new leader of the synagogue. Remember, Crispus was now with Paul, and his whole household, probably a lot of the servants of the synagogue, were in Paul's church. And here's Sosthenes is his name, and he's coming up, and he's probably the one that they made go forward with all these charges. And he says, no, we're not going to do that. And then the Jews got mad at him, and they beat him. You know what happened there? He got the sense knocked into him. You look at 1 Corinthians, the first letter to Corinth. Who does Paul address it to? Sosthenes and the leaders of the churches in Corinth. You have two leaders. One gave in when he heard the gospel. The other gave in when he got the sense beat into him. God will get you, and he will get his children in many different ways. We have to understand there are times where we're going to go through some harsh times. There's times where we're going to be depressed. There's times we're going to be discouraged. And there's going to be times where we think the world is completely against us. Discouragement is Satan's most useful tools to stress out the child of God. But God doesn't think you're small. He loved you so much, he sent his only son to die for you, to take away your sin, to be with him once again. Now, we can be discouraged when the King has given us his encouragement. Have you been dealing with loneliness, ignorance, or perjury? Well, company, acceptance, and truth are from Jesus. Now, I wish there was a magic formula to rid everyone here of discouragement, but that's just not what it's supposed to be. If you're feeling discouraged, find people to encourage. This will fill up your account and cause others to give you encouragement that you are praying for. It's a very strange thing to be a child of God. Things don't work the way you think they would. I heard this morning on the radio, they were discussing why was he not in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights like Jonah? And he was describing that a day in Jewish literature was from 6 p.m. until 6 p.m. the next night. It wasn't sundown to sundown. We go sunrise to sundown, 24 hour. That's how he was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights. There was 3 times of light and 3 times of darkness. Well, we don't get that. And I'm going to tell you something. A lot of times when you're dealing with things and you don't understand why God isn't taking care of it, it's because God doesn't work off of our schedule, off of our diagram. God works how he works. And his way is definitely the best. So if you have discouragement, you have an axe to grind, you have things that are just bothering you, there's only one place to go. That's God. It's prayer. It's forgiveness. It's love. It's encouragement. I've always heard if you, I said there's 2 dogs in your life. You have a negative dog and you have a positive dog, and the one you feed the most will be the strongest. So which one do you feed? The positive one or negative? Let's pray.